The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
Well, to make an omelet, you've got to break a few eggs. Fight Club is a film bathed in notoriety. Everyone from the cinephiles of old to film bros of today have heard the phrase at least once. And while the themes of Fight Club have been explored over and over again, people still seem to miss the fact that the film is a massive satire. The film's reception actually functions as proof of its importance. Fight Club satirizes toxic masculinity and consumer culture in the modern, 90s world. The reason that Fight Club is considered a classic film is that it hides its satirical nature very well. But there are many layers to this film, so let's dive in. Starting with broad spectrum isn't always the way to go, but in this case, let's define what a satire actually is. Satire is a form of comedy that exaggerates issues found amongst groups of people, whether that be on a societal level or a political level. In addition, it can mock social order or find flaws in the symptom and poke even larger holes in them. There are numerous critiques in Fight Club, from the dangers of conformist culture to parental issues, but the two largest are its views on masculinity and consumer culture. Tyler Durden, one of the protagonists of the film, is painted to be the pinnacle of the masculine figure. He's fit, he's funny, he's strong, and he's brave. So, when he creates this fight club, of course, all the men who already had begun to gravitate towards him eagerly join in. Because for them, fighting is a way of achieving calmness after their stressful days, and even functions as a reprieve. For the average person, getting physically assaulted for hours straight in front of a crowd of people does not sound very relaxing, but the film shows a different message. Pain is equivalent to freedom in the world of Fight Club, as is so eloquently said when Tyler pours acid onto the narrator's hand.
Only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything.
Fincher is essentially saying that the toxic male persona believes violence and strength are true markers of what makes a man. But in reality, these guys are not all that strong. The actual fights are relatively unprofessional, a lot of punching and slipping and just full body tackling. These are not professional wrestlers. These are not men who want to learn how to box. These are guys who want to get absolutely covered in blood and beat the shit out of other guys. While Fincher is showing these characters really getting into it and doing real physical damage to each other, what he's actually saying is that these guys are ridiculous. They are immature and believe that resorting to violence can fix the stressors of their everyday lives. While it can be temporary relief, the actual fix in this case is how Fight Club changes their mentality. It teaches them to stand up for themselves, to be braver than you might feel, because the worst that can happen is a little blood coming out. Herein lies the actual message. Masculinity isn't about seeing who's the strongest or the best. It's about using that strength in a way that is actually beneficial to your life. On the total flip side of this, the film also heavily critiques consumer culture.
We are consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession. Murder, crime, poverty, these things don't concern me. What concerns me are celebrity magazines.
As Tyler says, America at this point in time had become enslaved to the brand name. The narrator's apartment is filled with IKEA furniture, to which he says he's not even really sure what happened. It all just sort of appeared one day after opening a catalog. Tyler is a soap salesman before he meets the narrator, and audiences later find out that not only is he stealing the material to make his soap, yay, anti-capitalism, he is actually stealing liquid fat from a liposuction clinic. Tyler is selling soap to women made from their own cells and is making a killing doing it. It's the most ironic thing in the entire film, actually, but it illustrates Fincher's point so well. Americans have become so obsessed with image in the modern age that they will virtually do anything to maintain it. So, yes, Tyler is aggressively anti capitalist when he's talking about how corporations have enslaved modern America, but then 30 minutes later, he literally enslaves a small army that is Project Man to carry out his bidding under the guise of freeing them. That type of backhanded action is so consistent with how most of the corporations in America run that it is impossible to write it off as anything else. Moving on to societal expectations. How fun. In the film, the owner of the basement in which they had been holding their fight club came down to see what was happening. At first, he tells them that they have to get out, but then Tyler comes over. He goads the owner into talking, and eventually the conversation ends with Tyler on the floor, covered in his own blood, and the owner letting them have the basement. This interaction is intent on showing power dynamics in societal order. The big boys in charge will give you whatever you want, so long as you lose a little bit of yourself along the way. Fitting in is treated as the biggest vice in this film, considering it's about consumer culture and toxic masculinity. However, the narrator doesn't even fit into this world that he helped to create. The narrator is outside of the group, constantly being left in the dark and expected to race after them all blindly. The narrator actually represents the free thinkers of America, which is why it's so ironic that he doesn't have an original thought throughout the entire film. That is until the end, but we're not up to that yet. Now, let's dive into the different types of satire. Each of the three main characters of the film represents a different type of satire. Tyler represents Horatian, the narrator represents Juvenalian, and Marla represents Menippean. With Horatian satire, the characteristics are a lighter tone and much more mild critiques through large exaggerations and blatant fun-poking. Tyler is the peak of Horatian satire. He's goofy, he casually throws in lines that offer some illumination to the narrator and other characters, and he is the biggest exaggeration because he is literally a personification of who the narrator wants to be. He also walks around in crazy clothes, does crazy movements and dances and fights, and other stuff that are indicative of comic relief. The thing that's interesting with Tyler is that he actually does act upon his darker critiques of society, which would fit more in with Juvenalian. However, it is because of his easygoing attitude and general disregard for the world that I would categorize him here. Sure, he says some insightful things, but it is the narrator who breaks them down and really ponders them. Speaking of, Juvenalian satire is the narrator. Juvenalian satire is described as much darker tones and harsher, more serious, mainly social critiques. He balances out Tyler's goofiness with a very mundane/pessimistic view of the world. He also is used to show a contrast with the main themes that the film talks about. He isn't very strong or particularly prone to violent outbursts, but he does buy into consumer culture. He gradually moves away from his maximist consumer culture and aggressive views of himself in regards to his masculinity the more and more he and Tyler connect. But the original mind state he is in starkly contrasts this, seeing that by the end of the film he and Tyler have seemingly embodied each other. The narrator now is the one leading Project Mayhem, and his previously nervous, self-conscious state has taken a step back to become a powerful, strong leader. Finally, we wrap up the forms of satire with Menippean. Menippean satire is categorized as targeting anything that can be defined as morally repugnant, and can be anything from funny to a dark tragedy. Enter Marla Singer. Marla is very consistent with Menippean satire because she is the most morally charged character in the film, or at least she acts like it. She has an air about her of what's right and wrong, and she holds to her beliefs quite clearly. She pushes the narrator out of his comfort zone and basically latches on because she knows it irks him. She also is the most ironic character because she treats her life with a very bipolar nature. She tries to kill herself in one of the scenes, but then laughs about it as Tyler swoops in to rescue her. She is supposed to represent people's attitudes in the world at that time and how worldviews were changing to a more sarcastic and devil-may-care manner. So, after all that, if you're still asking whether or not Fight Club is a satire, let me very clearly spell it out. Studio Binder listed out the steps to crafting a satire, and Fight Club meets every single one of them. It has a clear target of what needs to be changed in society, that being views on masculinity and the fact that it's not all about punching people out and yelling at them. Also to stop spending every paycheck on Nordly. In the case of which type of satire to use, Fight Club checks every box. The final thing is to exaggerate. Between the very dreamlike camera work, the dark and gritty and crispy visuals, and the tight experimental shots that put us into the heads of the main characters, the cinematography is very exaggerated. There are so many instances of irony in the dialogue as well, mainly in Tyler's, like when he says they don't need women but then continues to sleep with Marla, or when he says they need to break out and do important things but just resorts to physical violence and chaos. Finally, a good satire needs a symbol for some big idea. Tyler Durden. He represents the narrator's idea of a peak male, someone who defies societal expectations and beliefs. However, as the film continues and Tyler gets crazier, this illusion begins to dissolve and he resorts to every toxic trait he fought so hard to get away from. He fights with the narrator and he buys into consumer culture by destroying buildings and ruining things, which is just paying more attention to the causes. At the end of the film, Tyler is just like everyone else. He's irrational, he's prone to violence, and he's just plain harsh when it comes to dealing with the narrator's emotions. He is peak masculinity, that is true, but the worst parts of it. So, why do people still idolize Tyler Durden? Fincher did so much to make him unappealing by the end of the film, and to really show that Tyler Durden is everything wrong with the concept of toxic masculinity. The easy answer is that Tyler Durden is played by Brad Pitt. The real answer is because we as a society still don't fully grasp what the message of Fight Club is. While it talks about toxic masculinity and consumer culture, what the film is really saying is that conformity is not what's important. It's important to be who you are and to stick to your ideals. If there's any argument about that point, look at the big reveal of the film, which I won't say because some people here still have not seen it. Or maybe not. Either way, watch the damn movie and decide for yourself whether or not I'm right. I am. Spoiler alert.